Well, we are officially underway with my look back at the Invasion storyline 20 years later, and this week we're looking at the storyline's namesake, Fully Loaded No More. I'm talking about WWF Invasion from July 2nd at the Gunn Arena in Cleveland, Ohio, the same building, by the way, that Raw took place during the final Nitro earlier in the year when Shane bought the company. This show was nominated by Kyle Colagrossi, Jesse Sutherland, Jared Sedgwick, Jack Hernandez, Dinobot 2, Jason LaRaga, and Travis Shaver over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. Wow. A lot has happened between King of the Ring and this show here. And I'm going to do my best to try and catch everyone up and just not just the storyline side of things, but also the reality and the real life situation, what was going on surrounding the storyline itself. So I'll do my best. Let's begin. On the Raw after King of the Ring, Shane McMahon officially declares the invasion of the WWF is on. Then things begin to fall off the rails pretty quick. So in storyline, Linda and Vince are still in divorce mode. Linda tells Vince to start hosting WCW matches on Federation programming. It all seemed like it was kind of a soft launch of what the Federation had originally planned with the WCW license once they got it. According to a lot of different interviews from people who were there during that time, the original plan was to make WCW its own separate touring brand and just kind of jumpstarting the company again. Kind of what Raw and SmackDown are now, is two separate groups of talent and writers and everything, but it's, keeping the WCW name. In fact, there were rumors that the WCW show was going to replace Raw's time slot on Monday nights. So they were definitely seeming to be invested in that idea for a bit, and I guess the idea of having WCW matches on WWF programming was kind of that soft launch. But there were a lot of hurdles going against that goal. One of the biggest ones was all those big WCW stars like Nash and Goldberg and Scott Steiner and Sting were sitting out the remainder of their Time Warner contracts, so they were not available. Another problem was a lot of the guys they did get in the WCW acquisition weren't necessarily household names, and there were some, Federation loyal fans who honestly didn't know who these people were and didn't understand why they were important, and the Federation didn't do a very good job of building that side up either. And then a real big problem storyline-wise in kayfabe is that the WCW people are not people you really want to root for, because they're constantly portrayed as cowards and cheats when they're doing stuff in the ring, and they're buried on commentary, they're buried by other wrestlers as well, and it's this hostile thing where it's like, it's hard to really get behind a group like this when you don't know who a lot of these people, well, you might not know who a lot of those folks are, and they're not being portrayed in the best light. So when we go to Tacoma, Washington in early July to see Booker T defend the WCW title against Buff Bagwell, the fans turn on it immediately. Didn't help that the match was shit, but even if it wasn't, the fans didn't give them a chance. Buff Bagwell's gone from the company by the next week due to bad behavior. The divorce angle with Vince and Linda evaporates after this. Then Shane and DDP appear to be on the outs for all of like 3 days before swerving The Undertaker. And on that same show, ECW joined the battle when Rob Van Dam, Tommy Dreamer, and a bunch of Federation guys with ECW ties all defected. The ECW thing seemed to be some sort of last-ditch effort to inject some life and pizzazz into the storyline because it was dying a death so quickly with those live performances in Tacoma. And apparently, according to David Bixenspan, he did a report on this where Paul Heyman allegedly created all these burner email accounts to start this fake grassroots movement through wrestling journalists to get the ECW brand brought back in the Invasion storyline. So the WWF adds the ECW element, but then it turns out, whoops, they don't have the legal rights to actually use the name because all that stuff is still tied up in bankruptcy court. So a settlement's ultimately reached where they can use the ECW name, and then they ultimately buy the rights to ECW. Paul Heyman is shrewd, but he's very clever in how he basically got himself out of bankruptcy debt and everything. And no matter what happened with that as to how it all came together, I still argue it's a top 5 moment for me for the best Monday Night Raw moments. Also, I felt bad for Jerry Lynn in all this because he has to be the one guy with the ECW ties who was not brought into the storyline and also had nothing else going on. But anyway, on the same show where the ECW guys invade, the show actually ends with ECW and WCW joining forces to take on the World Wrestling Federation, and now Stephanie McMahon is the new owner of ECW, and Jesus wept. It's so wild to see this all play out in real time. Not even a week to week does the storyline change from King of the Ring to Invasion. From episode of Raw to episode of SmackDown, things change. It's so crazy because it seems that even they didn't know where they were going to go with this. The idea of them taking WCW and making it a separate brand, it's all good in theory, but it's hard to make the company look ready for prime time when you spent so many years disparaging them and you keep doing it in the early part of the storyline, making everyone seem so bad. It's a storyline that could have and should have taken several months to play out, but they just ram everything through and speed through in the course of like 4 to 5 weeks, and just the rush job, it just comes very clear as you watch this unfold. Anyway, on with the show. 17,000 plus in the Gunn arena, 770,000 pay-per-view buys makes this the most bought pay-per-view of the year that was not WrestleMania. Jim Ross and Michael Cole calling the action here, and boy, they are laying it on thick in this opening promo package with footage of FDR and Winston Churchill, all these World War II allegories. Like, yes, this self-promoted conflict that you have kind of backed yourself into a corner with how you've booked it is just like World War II. Also in the package, Paul Heyman screams in Latin. I love the set design here. The 2 tunnels on stage for Team Alliance and Team WWF. Very unique, and it's something they haven't really done before or since. By the way, since I brought up the name The Alliance, they're not officially called that yet in the storyline. They're called the Coalition. The Alliance comes a bit after this, but for the purpose of simplicity, I'm just going to call them The Alliance on this show. We get the pyro and the crowd shots, then we teleport to the middle of Lance Storm and Mike Awesom's entrance. The former Team Canada in the ring. Storm wants to get serious for a minute. Before we can get too far into it though, Edge and Christian interrupt. Edge, of course, won last month's King of the Ring, and Christian's been hogging all the time with the trophy ever since. It's a funny dynamic for Edge and Christian right now because the way that the Invasion storyline is set up, basically if you're from WWF, you're automatically the babyface in the grand scheme of things. But looking at these two individually, Edge is very clearly leaning face, and Christian is still very obviously a heel. Awesome begins with his strength, but Edge is able to use his quickness to outmaneuver he and Storm. Scary moment for Christian where he tries to go over the top rope, but he clips the rope and he goes tumbling. I love the offbeat shenanigans sign in the crowd. It's a reference to a promo Lance Storm cut on Edge and Christian a couple of weeks ago where he mocked them for their 5-second poses and offbeat shenanigans. And Edge and Christian come out and Edge goes, "Offbeat shenanigans rule!" Christian getting beaten up now, thrown chest first into the ring post. A chest breaker by Storm. Christian gets a moment of hope with a cross body, but Awesome gets to him. A big ass splash off the top rope, but Edge breaks up the cover. Goes for a top rope Awesome bomb, but Christian fights out. Big hot tag to Edge, and he's on fire. Storm with a small package, but Christian helps out Edge. We get a kick out. Storm jumping over a spear attempt by Edge, but Edge hits Awesome instead. Mike goes for an Awesome bomb on Edge, but Christian spears him. Edge falls on top of Mike. The cover in the win, and the WWF draws first blood if you don't count the match on Heat earlier when Chavo Guerrero beat Scotty 2 Hotty. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. Pretty exciting opening matchup here. Everything's well executed. Had a couple of great moments, especially that finish. I love the crowd being as excited as they were for the whole time, pretty much. They're almost full throat for the entirety of this show. It's really cool. It really improves the experience, in my opinion. Backstage, Vince is over the moon about Edge and Christian's win, saying they reek of awesomeness. Commissioner Regal lets him know the old Stone Cold has returned. Vince makes a vivid comparison to the Revolutionary War, and William doesn't like hearing about all that British bloodshed. By the way, it's the night of pep talks on this show because you will see at least one pep talk from either side of the coin between every single match. Well, here's something we all wanted to see. It's a good old referee fight as the WCW's Nick Patrick takes on the WWF's Earl Hebner with special guest ref Mick Foley. This war has gotten so bad and so pervasive. We have referees fighting now, fighting over locker room space, fighting over costly calls and so forth. I will admit though, I love me a good Nick Patrick flop because when he takes ref bumps, the way he sells it is so amazing and hysterical. So if we get a few of those in this matchup, we could have a banger on our hands. We got the opposing referee crews here, but what's a young Brian Hebner doing in the WCW team? At 2, Brian? JR says Earl bleeds WWF blood, which sounds gross. Earl starts out hot against Patrick. Nick taking a hellacious bump out of the corner with that slingshot. Get a lot of rolling around. Patrick yoinks Earl out of the ring. Back in the ring, Hebner back on top. We get some corner punches, but a low blow. Patrick with a baseball slide. WCW refs get to stomping on the outside, but then the Federation crew makes the save. Foley ejects the WCW crew. Nick's upset about this, but then Earl just runs up and checks him, pins and wins. Patrick gets back up and gets in Foley's face, and Nick responds with the mandible socko. I give it 1 star out of 5. It's a goofy referee fight. There's not really much to expect from this. At least the match wasn't too long, and in a match with these kind of circumstances, it's the best you could hope for. And again, the crowd was into it. We get a promo for that inaugural season of Tough Enough on MTV. Then we get a recap of the last SmackDown where DDP abducted Austin's wife, Deborah. Then backstage, Deborah is still traumatized over what happened to her. Sarah, the Undertaker's wife, empathizes with her, and both ladies agree that their husbands will get the job done tonight in the inaugural Brawl. Up next, the the APA take on Shawn O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo, the WWF Tag Champs versus the WCW Tag Champs. For symmetry, the APA have been some of the most vocal leaders in the Federation's resistance against WCW's invasion, leading many rallying cries and pep talks every week. Palumbo and O'Haire, of course, are the cocky young invaders. The match starts out as a big brawl, a cheap shot behind Bradshaw, allowing Palumbo and O'Haire to take over. Shawn showing some more of that ridiculous athleticism that got him over in WCW, but honestly, it comes off a bit rushed at times. Bradshaw getting worked over, but he hits a DDT on Chuck. Farouk tags in, but then he gets beaten up for a while. Bradshaw comes back in. There's some nice teamwork by the Young Guns. He assisted dropkick into the corner. Palumbo with the super kick to Farouk, but walks into a clothesline from hell by Bradshaw. The APA wins, and the Federation's now up 3-1. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. It's a pretty good matchup, and I think Palumbo and O'Haire did a pretty good job keeping up with the APA. It feels like one of those scenarios where the APA is giving the young guys like a test on big pay-per-view setting and everything, kind of a sink or swim sort of thing. And I think the WCW guys did really well for the most part, but they weren't really able to show off a lot of what brought them to the dance and got them so popular in WCW. We got a small fraction of it, but not enough for my liking. Vince chatting with Chris Jericho backstage. Jericho talks about having worked for WCW and ECW before, takes a lot of shots at Paul Heyman here, makes fun of his looks and calls him a big white Shrek. Jericho says that Team WWF is going to get even. One of the failed catchphrases that Y2J tried out, and he and Vince share a catchphrase together.
Never, ever be the same.
Elsewhere, Shane and Stephanie are frustrated with the current score, but Paul Heyman gives Kidman a big pep talk. Kidman's confident, though, and says he will prove why everyone says X-Pac sucks. So we go to that next match now, light heavyweight champion versus cruiserweight champion, X-Pac versus Billy Kidman. And these two belts have been changing hands a little bit in the last month. One night after the odd ending to their match at King of the Ring, X-Pac beat Jeff Hardy in the rematch to become the champion. Jeff rebounded nicely by winning the hardcore title a couple weeks later. Man, Jeff picks up a lot of singles gold in 2001. Meanwhile, Kidman won the cruiserweight title from Shane Helms on SmackDown a couple of weeks ago. We get another match here with a very interesting kind of face-heel dynamic because, by association, Kidman should be the heel because he's with WCW, the Invaders and everything. Meanwhile, everyone still hates X-Pac. Like, he has not received well as a babyface in this match at all. So it's a very interesting dynamic. They do overcome that with some great cruiserweight action, very fast-paced and clean. I love the sliding facebuster off the apron onto the floor. X-Pac using Kidman's momentum against him, and Billy flies outside. X-Pac with the dive. I do love JR on commentary in this matchup. Particularly this one seems to be the best I hear him all night in terms of breaking down these little intricacies. Talks about X-Pac's history in WCW, talks about the psychology of light heavyweight matches. Really good stuff here. X-Pac slows things down with a sleeper, and the fans are all over him for that. X-Pac goes for a top rope flipping senton, but he gets none of it. BK with a comeback, going for the corner punches, but shock of shocks, X-Pac hits him with a powerbomb, but he can't do it twice in a row. When will you learn to not try and powerbomb Billy Kidman? Kidman dives, but X-Pac catches him in midair with an X-Factor. There's a kick out. Bronco Buster attempt turns into a super dick kick city. Kidman with the shooting star press. He wins, and WCW gets another win on the board. I give it 4 stars out of 5. It's one of my favorite matches on the night. Very fun to watch. It's funny for all the great lengths the WWF goes to try and erase all of what made WCW cool and different and interesting. This match really captures the spirit of that old cruiserweight style that actually made WCW cool and different and interesting for a bit. DDP chats with the McMahons and Heyman. Shane tells him to concentrate on the inaugural Brawl and not Deborah or Sarah. Elsewhere, Torrie Wilson and Stacy Keibler with some very organic convo about their breasts and their legs, respectively, and they can't wait to hit on the Hardy Boys later. Yes, sir, the crack riding team strikes again.
Stace, you do have a firm ass. I know.
Up next, Commissioner William Regal takes on Raven. Remember they gave that guy storylines? Good times. Some aggressive strikes between both guys to start things off. Raven dumps Regal outside and does an interesting baseball slide before the Russian leg sweep into the barricade. Raven goes for a clothesline, but Regal doesn't quite get out of the corner enough, so Raven's got to meet him halfway. He attacks the midsection, and that allows him to take over. Raven trying all manner of ways to beat Regal, but the Commissioner keeps fighting back. The Regal cutters counter into a DDT attempt. We get a collision in the ring. Then Tazz shows up, the occasional friend of Raven, runs down to the ring and hits a suplex on Willie Riggs. The Raven effect DDT, and Raven wins. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I love the aggression and the physicality in this match. It wasn't clean 100% of the time, but it certainly was not boring either. As far as Tazz's involvement in this match, there will be a payoff to this a bit later. Backstage, Vince McMahon with another pep talk to The Undertaker and Kane. Vince bringing up DDP's stalker videos, but that causes the dead man to snap, tells him we'll be seeing the best of The Undertaker tonight. On we go to a hasty hastily thrown together six-man tag as the Big Show with his terrible new t-shirt, Billy Gunn and Intercontinental Champion Albert takes on Shawn Stasiak, Hugh Morris, and Chris Kanyon. What an odd six-man this match is on paper. Albert is in the middle of his brief and heatless run as IC champion. Billy Gunn has recovered from being a bitter Billy about not being in the King of the Ring tournament and is a face once again. The match begins with triple press slams, a cheap shot by Stasiak allowing Kanyon to hit some of that classic innovative offense against Gunn. The crowd pops for something going on, but it's not Albert and Stasiak hitting the ropes, that's for sure. Gunn tags in and beats up Morris, hits the Famouser. Kanyon gets involved. Stasiak hits Billy with the reverse DDT. Morris covers and wins for his team, but he soon pays for it as the Big Show chokeslams the WCW guys in a rage, but saves the devastating alley-oop for last. I give it 1 star out of 5. Like I said at the top of this match, I think it was kind of thrown together last minute. There's no real heat to this other than the fact it was us versus them. And the match itself was pretty short and nondescript. Backstage, Shane and WCW's double champ Booker T getting psyched for the main event. Shane looks as if he's going to break any second as we cut to Tajiri in William Regal's office. Regal gets in Tajiri's face and tells him to take out that miserable little gobshite Tazz up next. So we have that match here. Tazz is one of the many guys who defected from the Federation to ECW, and I love how the commentary team is just so heartbroken and disappointed. Tazz had a promising future as a broadcaster here at the Federation. He's thrown it all the way to be part of this alliance. Meanwhile, Tajiri earning some brownie points by staying with the Federation. In fact, there was a bit of a misdirection on SmackDown when Tajiri was wearing an ECW shirt, but it was a ruse. Tajiri lights up Tazz with some kicks, but Tazz laying him out with a clothesline. Some back and forth showcasing Tajiri's strikes and Tazz's judo and submission work. Tajiri comes back with a springboard back elbow, but Tazz slows things down on the outside, talks some trash. The tarantula is locked in, we get the big buzzsaw kick, but Tazz kicks out. Tazz blocks another kick and hits a suplex, shoves the referee out of the way, but Tajiri hits the green mist, another kick, and Tajiri wins. I give it 3 stars out of 5. It's a pretty entertaining match in a relatively small window. I love the combination of Tajiri's strikes and Tazz's suplex. It's a really fun combo, and the ending was pretty clever as well. Matt and Jeff Hardy are backstage. Matt warns Jeff about how good a competitor Rob Van Dam is, when suddenly RVD whacks Matt from behind with a chair, warns Jeff, and flees. Meanwhile, at WWF New York, Hardcore Holly assaults a fan for wearing a WCW shirt, and security does nothing. Does Bob not realize that that guy's money works there too? On we go to the only title match of the night as Jeff Hardy defends the Hardcore Championship against RVD. The action between these two is swift and sudden from the word go, and I keep bringing up the crowd element in this show, but I will bring up again, the dynamic of the crowd feels different in this match compared to literally everything else before or after this matchup. A bit wilder, a bit louder, and a bit more raucous than the rest of the show. I mean, these guys move so fast for a while, it's hard to really recap what happens here. RVD goes up top, but Jeff shoves him onto the floor and starts taking over. Jeff goes onto the barricade, but RVD meets him there as well. I love that. Fighting on the outside, RVD with a moonsault off the barricade, hits the spinning leg drop. Jeff responds with a sunset flip powerbomb on the floor. Jeff is the first one to grab a weapon, a tall-ass ladder, goes up to the top, but Van Dam shakes the ladder and Jeff comes tumbling down, and JR with a line you probably heard several times in all those "don't try this at home" PSAs.
How do you learn to fall off a 20-foot ladder?
A chair comes into play on the ramp. Jeff wants to swing, but RVD hits the Van Daminator and Hardy flies off the stage. Back in the ring, RVD goes for the split-legged moonsault, but Jeff puts the knees up. Jeff goes for a swanton, but RVD rolls out of the way. Van Dam with the 5-star frog splash with the belt assist. RVD pins and wins the Hardcore Championship. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Easily the match of the night here. These two just put on a hell of a spectacle in this thing. Just very fun and entertaining throughout the entire thing. Really putting RVD on the map in the Federation in terms of where he would ultimately rank. And I think this was a big jumping off point for him as to why he was so popular during the Invasion and why he was such a babyface in the heel group of the Alliance. I think this performance really had a lot to do with it. Vince is backstage with Kurt Angle, and Vince tries to motivate Angle with some USA stuff, but Kurt says, enough of this Americana bullshit. Whoa! He's working red, white, and blue tonight. Kurt says he's not just doing it for his country or for the Federation, he's doing it for himself. A great babyface promo by Angle here as he's building himself up as a more legitimate kind of like top guy, leader position as the storyline progresses, and also kind of separates him a bit from the goofier side of what he was doing. On we go to our Brawl and Panties tag team match as Stacy, Keibler, and Torrie Wilson take on Trish, Stratus, and Lita. The gals from WCW have thrown down the gauntlet for this monumental matchup, and meanwhile, Trish and Lita still have a bit of a beef, not just stemming from their time fighting each other in the year 2000, but also more recently, Trish has been hitting on both Matt and Jeff. Then the WCW ladies start hitting on the boys, and now Trish and Lita are both mad. Torrie, by the way, had famously debuted on Raw to try and hit on Vincent McMahon, but it was all a setup to make Vince look bad in front of with Linda. God bless Torrie for having to put up with all this on like her first day on the job. Mick Foley is back out once again to officiate. Look at Stacy with the Superwoman slap to start things off. Torrie and Trish are the first two working here. Trish goes to the top, but Stacy cuts her off. Torrie and Stacy can't agree on who should wrestle next, and Stacy goes in the hard way. Lita not getting paid by the hour and immediately takes off Stacy's shirt. Keibler and Wilson do some trickery to Lita, and now Lita's top's been removed. Torrie attacking Trish with some hair mares and hair pulls. Trish with a scintillating reversal, as JR puts it, and within seconds, Torrie is out of the match. Moonsault to Stacy, the pants come off, and Team WWF win. Mick Foley's got all of Torrie's clothes stuffed in the front of his pants. Trish and Lita are so happy they almost fall off the stage. I give it 1 star out of 5. Honestly, I'm not sure how they were able to pull off having essentially 2 comedy matches in one pay-per-view, the referee fight and this one. And by the way, 3/4 of those competitors in the combined 2 matches aren't trained wrestlers, by the way, but they made it work for each of them. The crowd was into it each time. You know, the commentary in this was pretty funny between JR and Cole, so listen to that if you like. There you go. Vince goes to Steve Austin's locker room, but Stone Cold doesn't need any motivating. He's not here to play guitar or sing or hug. He's gonna whoop somebody's ass, and that's the bottom line. The score is all tied up between the Alliance and Team WWF, and now it's time for our main event, the inaugural Brawl, as Team Alliance, that's DDP, Booker T, Rhino, and the Dudley Boys, take on Team WWF, Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and The Undertaker and Kane. As the Alliance runs roughshod and really threatens the very fabric of the makeup of the foundation of the World Wrestling Federation, something has got to be done. We need to look to a hero. Fred Blassie, standing up out of his wheelchair, can only do so much. They need the WWF champion Steve Austin, but Vince does not want the current Steve Austin that hugs him. He needs the old Stone Cold. But Austin just gives him a look, says no, and he walks off despondently. He's drinking in the bar. Finally, on the go-home Raw, Austin famously saves the Federation from an Alliance beatdown, coming back as the old Stone Cold. One of the biggest pops you ever done see, as he raises hell and helps save the day. The McMahons and Paul Heyman are introduced first, then the wrestlers. Booker T comes out and JR goes, he's no Ric Flair, he's no Sting. Like, damn, he goes out of his way to just bury the fuck out of Booker T on commentary here. DDP comes out last for the Alliance, which is kind of weird. The brawl begins early, then Stone Cold comes out to a massive ovation to help even the odds. It's Austin's first match since getting injured by Booker T at King of the Ring. Austin with a superplex to Rhino almost right out the gate. One by one, the members of Team WWF get lots of shots in on their opponents. Undertaker gets a little overzealous fighting the Alliance and gets cut off. DDP takes advantage and probably gets the most offense he's gotten on Taker in weeks. Booker takes quite a beating, then it's Chris Jericho's turn as the Dudleys work him over. Angle goes on a run for a little bit but gets cut off. Angle valiantly fighting DDP into the corner but get the tag to Austin, or do we? The referee does not catch it. Diamond Cutter on Angle, shoulders back, chest out, leads to a big brawl with everyone. The ref's letting a lot of this go. WCW referee Charles Robinson gets in Taker's business. He takes the last ride for his efforts. Still a lot of minutes left in this match, folks. Austin appears to have injured his knee and is getting looked at as the brawl continues. Kane chokeslams Devon through the announce table. Rhino and Bubba Ray suplex Kane through the Spanish announce table. Jericho dives off the apron onto Rhino through another table. Bodies everywhere. Back in the ring, Kurt Angle on fire as he takes on Booker T. Vince throws the WWF title into the ring. Shane intercepts it and decks Vince. Angle slam on Booker T. The ankle lock. Booker's tapping, but there's no ref. Austin gets in the ring, but he attacks his own teammate. Helps Booker cover Kurt, makes the referee make the count. Team Alliance wins in a shocking turn of events. Booker's music plays for all of 10 seconds before we go to Austin's theme as he and Steph, Shane and Paul celebrate in the ring. Jim Ross screaming over this betrayal as we fade to black. I give it 3 stars out of 5. My biggest knock with this match is it just goes a little too long for my taste, but I understand the need for everyone involved to get their shit in at different points. I did like the overall story of the matchup, and I think that the escalation near the end when everyone's doing the big spots to get knocked out, that was a pretty cool moment to see. As far as the twist at the end with Austin joining the Alliance, man, I still don't know how to feel about that, because you could justify like the storyline reason for Austin not wanting to work with Vince, still being kind of ultimately against him, and he wants to be with the Alliance here. He does explain this more on the next Raw and everything. I can understand part of that, but just the timing of it's so bad, because you could tell when the old Stone Cold came back the previous week and how the fans just exploded for it. I think the Federation needed a top babyface. Angle wasn't quite ready to be that yet. I think one of the biggest problems we'll see as the storyline goes on is that Angle, I think, was put into that spot a bit prematurely. So you have this top babyface, and people want to see be a top babyface again, but instead he joins the the heel side of things, which honestly didn't need help getting heat, because I think you had enough elements there that people hated the Alliance no matter what. I think Austin being in part of the group, like, yeah, maybe people hate him a bit more, but they didn't need help in that department. I think the Federation needed Austin to be in that spot. Obviously, Austin has gone on record multiple times saying he hates this run because he hates working heel and everything. But there it was. Austin is now joining and leading the Alliance, and we're just going to have to wait and see how it all unfolds. My grade for the Invasion pay-per-view is a B-. Though on second thought, let's up it to a solid B grade just on the strength of the crowd alone, because those folks were superb all night. I gotta admit, I went into this show expecting a lot more bad matches than there ended up being here. Like, the referee fight and the Brawl and Panties match were objectively the worst matches on the show. If you turn your mind off and just kind of enjoy the goofiness that they were, like listen to the crowd reacted and the commentary having fun with it, like on that level it's enjoyable. But those and the six-man tag match left a lot to be desired, I think, in terms of just overall show cohesion. Yeah, but there were some surprising kind of sleeper hits on this show for me, like the opening tag match with Edge and Christian and Team Canada, X-Pac versus Kidman, better than I remember. RVD and Jeff Hardy was the standout match of the whole thing. I thought it was just going to be a one-show pay-per-view, but there's a lot more to it than that. But yeah, Austin's betrayal kind of puts a sour finish on this show. The rest of the match was okay, the main event. But yeah, Austin's going back to heeldom after the brief flirtation with being a face again. Really, you could just tell, took the wind out of the sails of the storyline and made it kind of more of a, we have more to suffer through now with this already kind of belabored storytelling. And where it's going to go from here, we are going to have to find out. But I think for this pay-per-view, the one and done Invasion, I think it was an above average way to get this storyline going into the next chapter. A couple things could have improved on, but I think overall it was entertaining. It was never a boring show. Lots of fun throughout. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review, folks. Now, as I am reviewing the Invasion storyline all the way through to December, once a month, I have to pad it out. I can't be doing these WWF in 2001 pay-per-views back-to-back every 2 weeks. So, gotta stretch it out a little bit and break it up a bit by doing different shows from different places in history. And the next time in 2 weeks, I'm reviewing WCW Spring Stampede 1997. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.